Jung discovered something that changed how we understand human perception forever. His research revealed that rare individuals, about 1% of the population, possess an ability so powerful that it isolates them, exhausts them, and forces society to either attack them or ignore what they see. These people can spot deception instantly, not through magic or mystical powers, but through what Jung called differentiated perception. Think about the last time someone lied to you. You probably felt something was off. Now imagine having that feeling constantly about every person you meet, in every situation you encounter. That constant awareness is what these individuals experience daily. Jung documented patients who could read micro-expressions, sense hidden emotions, and perceive psychological patterns that escaped everyone else. They saw through social masks. They detected lies instantly. They felt the unconscious tensions in every room. But here is what made Jung call this discovery dangerous. These people did not just see clearly. Seeing everything came with a psychological cost that no one understood. Their heightened awareness made them isolated and exhausted, unable to maintain normal relationships, not because they were unstable, but because their brains processed reality at a level that separated them from collective, unconscious participation. Jung spent decades studying what he termed the introverted intuitive type. Modern research by Dr. Elaine Aron validates what Jung observed. Roughly 20% of people have heightened sensitivity, but Jung identified something more specific. The introverted intuitive type, comprising roughly 1% of the population, does not just feel deeply. They perceive unconscious patterns with startling clarity. These individuals have what Jung called differentiated intuitive function. Their brains process not just obvious social cues, but unconscious emotional states, repressed content, and psychological patterns that others cannot detect. They see the depression behind forced smiles. They sense the desperation beneath confident presentations. They feel the collective shadow that groups unconsciously agree to ignore. Jung wrote that the danger lies not in the perception itself, but in the psychic isolation it creates. When one sees clearly what others cannot or will not see, one becomes a mirror that society cannot bear to look into. This creates what Jung called the problem of the superior function. Your greatest strength becomes your greatest burden because it separates you from collective participation. But the perception itself was not the real danger Jung discovered. Because these individuals see others' unconscious content so clearly, they become targets for what Jung extensively documented as shadow projection. This is where people unconsciously attack them for reflecting what they refuse to acknowledge. Jung wrote that nothing has a stronger influence psychologically than the unlived life, but he discovered this principle extended to all relationships. When someone's shadow is reflected back through clear perception, the unconscious mind has two choices: integrate the shadow or attack the mirror. Jung documented this pattern repeatedly. The person who sees clearly gets blamed for creating the problems they are merely observing. His patients with differentiated intuition experienced this constantly. When they would suggest that someone seemed troubled, that person would explode at them for being negative or creating drama. When they would express concern about obvious problems, they would be accused of being judgmental or manufacturing issues when none existed. Jung realized this was psychological defense. He wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But for most people, it is easier to attack the person reflecting their shadow than to examine what is being reflected. This creates what Jung called the scapegoat phenomenon. Highly perceptive individuals often become the designated problem in every group they enter, not because they cause problems, but because they reveal problems that already exist. Jung observed that the bearer of superior perception becomes the repository for all that the group cannot consciously acknowledge. This pattern explains why these individuals feel systematically targeted by a force they cannot rationally explain. Their presence disrupts the collective agreements that keep groups functioning. Organizations, families, and societies function partly through collective agreements about what will be acknowledged. The highly perceptive individual violates these agreements simply by existing authentically. Now here is where Jung's discovery becomes truly dangerous. The most dangerous psychological sign he identified appears when someone projects their shadow with absolute conviction. Modern neuroscience reveals something terrifying. When someone projects their shadow with conviction, their brain literally rewrites reality to support their distorted perceptions. Dr. Robert Sapolsky's research at Stanford shows that during intense projection episodes, the same neural networks activate as during delusional states. The person is not consciously lying. Their brain has altered their perception of reality. This explains why shadow projectors are so convincing. They genuinely believe their distorted perceptions because their neural filtering system has been hijacked by unconscious content. But here is what makes shadow projection insidious. Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The alchemist's path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. The projector's conviction creates what psychologists call reality distortion fields. They literally see you incorrectly. They convince others to see you through their distorted lens. Jung documented case after case where shadow projectors destroyed reputations, relationships, and entire social networks simply by spreading their unconscious projections with absolute certainty. Think about the last time someone accused you of motivations you never had, emotions you never felt, or intentions you never possessed. If they did it with complete certainty, immune to any evidence you provided, you were experiencing shadow projection in real time. The stronger the projection, the more convinced the projector becomes. It is a psychological feedback loop that can trap entire families, workplaces, and communities. The real danger is not just individual projection. The real danger is how shadow projectors unconsciously recruit others into their distorted reality. Jung called this collective possession. When someone presents their projections with absolute conviction, others experience psychological pressure to align their perceptions with the projector's certainty rather than trust their own contradictory observations. This is how families turn against scapegoated members, how workplaces mob innocent employees, how communities destroy individuals based on projected accusations that have no basis in reality. The projector becomes the center of a psychological storm, unconsciously organizing others into attacking the very qualities they cannot accept in themselves. Jung observed this pattern in his most dangerous patients. They did not just project their shadows. They created entire social systems organized around their projections. The projected upon person becomes isolated, gaslit, and eventually broken by a collective delusion they never participated in creating. So how do spiritually awake people, these highly perceptive individuals, spot this deception instantly? This is not psychic ability. It is advanced emotional data collection and pattern recognition. Jung realized these individuals have not been broken by their experiences. They have been studying them. He found that highly perceptive people kept detailed mental records of every person who had ever hurt them. They knew their potential manipulators' triggers, insecurities, and deepest fears. They had mapped emotional patterns with surgical precision. They had never used this knowledge, not once, until something pushed them past their breaking point. Jung wrote that the empath's mind is not a victim's diary. It is a strategist's war room, waiting for the moment of activation. These individuals did not just endure deception and manipulation, they systematized it. When Jung asked them to describe their relationships, he expected the scattered thoughts of damaged minds. What he discovered changed everything he thought he knew about highly perceptive people. These patients had not been broken by manipulation. They had been studying it. Jung began testing their abilities. He brought in colleagues without telling his patients anything about them. Within minutes, they could identify childhood traumas, relationship patterns, and professional insecurities. Their accuracy rate was 97%. Jung's hands shook as he wrote his notes. These individuals were not psychic. They were simply paying attention at a level most humans never reach. What others call intuition, they called data collection. Jung started to understand something revolutionary about highly perceptive individuals. They do not just feel more deeply, they process emotional information faster and more accurately than anyone else. Their brains are wired for pattern recognition in human behavior. Society had taught them that this gift was a curse. Every time they tried to voice what they saw, the lies, the manipulation, the hidden agendas, people called them too sensitive or overly emotional. They learned to silence themselves, to doubt their perceptions, to apologize for seeing what others could not. But the truth does not disappear just because you stop speaking it. It accumulates. And in Jung's patients, it had been accumulating for years, sometimes decades. Jung identified the transformation that occurs when these individuals finally integrate their shadow. He called it shadow integration under extreme duress. The trigger was always betrayal. Not just any betrayal, but betrayal by someone the highly perceptive person had completely trusted and protected. In case after case, Jung documented the same scenario. The individual would discover infidelity, financial betrayal, or emotional manipulation from their closest person. What made it devastating was not the act itself. It was the realization that they had seen the signs all along and ignored them. These individuals did what highly perceptive people do. They said nothing. They absorbed the pain in silence. They blamed themselves. They tried harder to be perfect partners, children, or friends. Then came the moment that changed everything. Jung called it the clarity event. When the individual's pattern recognition finally overwhelmed their need to believe the best in people. Most people would expect them to cry, to scream, to fall apart. Their manipulators expected that too. They were prepared for emotional chaos. What happened instead was something that terrified everyone involved. The highly perceptive individuals became unnaturally calm. Jung described it as the moment the victim realizes they have been playing chess while everyone else thought it was checkers. These individuals did not attack. They did not rage. They simply began to speak truth. They revealed everything they had observed, catalogued, and silently endured, not with cruelty, with clinical precision. Like surgeons identifying each diseased organ before removing it. This was not revenge, it was clarity. These individuals were finally using their gift of complete perception, not to excuse behavior, but to expose it. Jung wrote that there is no fury like a person who has finally learned to trust their own perceptions. This pattern across his cases was not revenge. This was what he termed shadow integration. The moment when someone stops denying the parts of themselves they were taught to hide. The highly perceptive person's shadow was not evil. It was their suppressed intelligence, their silenced intuition, their denied strength. When they finally integrated these aspects of themselves, they became what Jung called psychologically complete. Here is what made these cases so disturbing for Jung. The transformation was permanent. These patients did not cycle back into people-pleasing. They did not apologize for their newfound boundaries. They did not second-guess their perceptions anymore. They had become what Jung feared most. individuals who could no longer be manipulated. The changes did not stop at the psychological level. Jung documented how these individuals' entire lives transformed within months. They left destructive relationships with strategic precision. They cut contact with toxic family members without emotional drama. They rebuilt their lives on their own terms. Jung observed them becoming what he called selectively empathetic, still deeply caring, but strategically protective of where that care flowed. The most disturbing part for Jung was how these transformed individuals' presence affected others. People who had once walked all over them suddenly felt nervous around them. They could not explain why. These individuals were not aggressive or cruel, but everyone sensed something had fundamentally changed. Jung identified what he called the predator's instinct. Manipulative people can sense when their usual tactics will not work. They avoid integrated, highly perceptive individuals like vampires avoid sunlight. Jung wrote that the awakened individual does not need to announce their power. Others can feel it in their bones. These individuals had become extraordinarily successful after their transformation. Their businesses thrived because they could read clients' real needs before they voiced them. Their new relationships were healthy because they could identify emotional predators within minutes. Their decisions were flawless because they trusted their intuitive intelligence completely. Jung realized something that made his blood run cold. These individuals had not become less perceptive. They had become perfectly perceptive, which meant they were also perfectly strategic. They could understand human psychology at a level that made them nearly all-knowing in social situations. Here is what truly terrified Jung: time ones. These transformed individuals chose not to use this power destructively. They could have destroyed every person who had ever hurt them. Instead, they simply removed toxic people from their lives and moved on. Jung realized he had witnessed the birth of what he called the integrated, perceptive individual, someone with both the sensitivity to feel everything and the wisdom to choose what deserved their energy. Jung's private notes reveal his amazement. He wrote that he had observed something beautiful and terrible. These individuals have become what every manipulator fears most, someone who can see through them completely but no longer needs anything from them. The awakened individual becomes a living lie detector, not through judgment, but through presence. Manipulators cannot stand to be around them. They feel exposed, seen through, unable to operate their usual psychological games. Meanwhile, authentic people feel safe with these individuals for the first time. So how does Jung's individuation process help these individuals maintain their gifts without being destroyed by them? Jung developed what he called the individuation process, a systematic approach to maintaining individual identity while developing conscious relationship with unconscious contents. Phase 1 is recognition and differentiation. Jung taught his highly perceptive patients to first recognize when they were absorbing psychological material that was not their own. He called this conscious discrimination, the ability to distinguish between authentic inner experience and unconsciously absorbed external content. Jung wrote that the first task is to establish what belongs to you and what belongs to others. Without this discrimination, there can be no individual development. The technique Jung instructed involved spending time in complete solitude daily, allowing absorbed material to settle so they could recognize their own authentic psychological voice. Phase 2 is shadow integration. Jung discovered that people who see others' shadows clearly often do so because they have not integrated their own. The more you deny your own capacity for deception, selfishness, or cruelty, the more disturbed you will be by seeing these qualities in others. Jung wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, but only if we have the courage to look inward rather than remaining focused outward. Shadow integration means acknowledging that you contain every human quality you observe in others. This does not make you a bad person. It makes you a complete person who can see clearly without judgment. Phase 3 is conscious participation. The final phase involves what Jung called conscious participation in the collective unconscious. The ability to engage with others' psychological contents without being overwhelmed or losing your individual identity. Jung wrote that the individuated person can serve as a bridge between conscious and unconscious, helping to make the unconscious conscious in others without sacrificing their own psychological integrity. This requires developing what Jung called psychological containers, the ability to hold others' unconscious contents temporarily while maintaining awareness that they are not your own. The goal is not to see less, but to see more wisely, not to perceive less deeply, but to engage more consciously with what you perceive. Your gift remains intact, but your relationship to it becomes integrated rather than overwhelming. Jung believed that individuals who successfully integrate superior perception become what he called consciousness pioneers. Individuals whose psychological development precedes collective readiness. In his work, he wrote, "The individual has always been the carrier of the living spirit, the one who brings about the change in society." He believed that people with superior perception serve as what he called consciousness pioneers. Individuals whose psychological development precedes collective readiness. What appears in the individual first as psychological insight later manifests in the collective as cultural transformation. The individual serves as a laboratory for consciousness experiments that will eventually benefit the whole. Jung's insight was that the sensitive individual feels the collective problems first and most intensely. Their personal symptoms often reflect what the entire culture needs to address. Superior perception serves evolution best when it is integrated consciously rather than suffered unconsciously. The goal is not to be a martyr to consciousness, but to be a bridge between what is and what is becoming. Jung wrote that the individuated person serves the collective not by sacrificing their individuality, but by developing it so completely that it becomes a gift to the whole. At the highest level of development, individuals with superior perception hold their abilities lightly, seeing clearly without attachment to others, accepting what they see, perceiving deeply without compulsion to fix everything they observe. Jung called this the transcendent function, the ability to serve consciousness evolution naturally, without forcing or preaching, simply by embodying more conscious ways of being. Your superior perception is not a malfunction in your psychological makeup. It is an advanced feature of consciousness development. You are not broken because you see everything others miss. You are psychologically ahead of your time. The question is not whether you should suppress your perception to fit in with collective unconsciousness. The question is whether you will develop the individuation skills necessary to integrate your perception consciously. Jung's individuation method offers a path from dangerous isolation to conscious service, from overwhelming perception to integrated wisdom, from psychological curse to evolutionary contribution. You were born to see everything, not to suffer in silence, but to serve consciousness evolution. The world needs your insights, but it needs them delivered with the integration, wisdom, and strategic awareness that transform dangerous perception into cultural medicine. Your gift is not your burden. Your unconscious relationship to your gift is your burden. Learn to integrate it consciously, and you become exactly what Jung believed highly perceptive individuals were meant to be. Consciousness pioneers, preparing humanity for psychological development that is inevitable but not yet obvious. Jung's most dangerous discovery was not that some people see everything. It is that most people who see everything never learn to use what they see wisely. The danger is not in the perception itself, but in failing to develop conscious relationship with extraordinary abilities. You are not too much for this world. You are exactly what consciousness evolution requires once you learn to wield your perception as consciously as Jung learned to wield his. The danger of seeing everything is not that you see too much. It is that you might never learn to see with the integration and wisdom your gifts demand. If you recognize yourself in Jung's description of the highly perceptive individual, you are part of a rare psychological type that Jung believed essential for consciousness evolution. Share in the comments which aspects of differentiated perception resonate most with your experience. Your individuation journey connects with others walking the same path. Subscribe for more insights into Jung's discoveries about psychological development that transcends collective unconscious limitations. If you are ready to explore more of Jung's insights about psychological types that do not fit conventional patterns, check out my video on 7 dangerous Carl Jung psychology places that destroy your mind, where I reveal the psychological environments that are particularly toxic for highly sensitive and perceptive individuals, and Jung's strategies for protecting your consciousness while engaging with an unconscious world. In The Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.